After my husband Peter passed away, the house felt unbearably quiet. Every corner whispered memories I wasn't ready to revisit. Every shadow stretched longer than I remembered. I had spent 71 years building a life filled with small routines and steady comfort, but now those routines were hollow, and comfort seemed like a memory from someone else's life. When my son, Robert, suggested I move in with him and his wife, Dawn, I thought it would bring a spark of warmth back into my days. "Mom, it's just for a while," Robert said gently, as though trying to persuade me without sounding insistent. "You shouldn't be alone right now." I wanted to believe him. After all, family was supposed to be a sanctuary. So, I packed my life into a handful of boxes, photographs, Peter's watch, my favorite teacups, and sold the small house Peter and I had built together. The thought that I could help Robert and Dawn settle into a new home felt like a gift, though I didn't realize that gifts could sometimes be mistaken for obligations. At first, the days blended in a comforting rhythm. I woke early, made breakfast, and walked my grandson, Ethan, to school. I hummed old tunes while folding laundry and tried to infuse the apartment with the same sense of home we had once cherished. Robert seemed appreciative at first, and Dawn, though brisk, offered occasional smiles. I told myself the tension I sometimes noticed was just the pressure of their busy lives, but small cracks began to appear almost immediately. Dawn's smiles became tighter and her words sharper. She criticized the way I folded towels, the way I set the table, even the way I cooked simple meals. Robert, once my little boy with wide, trusting eyes, seemed to retreat behind the glow of his phone and the hum of the television. Ethan, ever observant, mirrored his mother's impatience, calling me "old lady" in a tone I had never heard from my own child. I tried to be patient, reminding myself that love sometimes required silence and endurance. I would tell myself at night, "They are busy. I am here to help, not to judge." But patience, I quickly realized, has limits. And one afternoon, those limits were crossed. It happened in the kitchen, a space that had once been the heart of our home. I was stirring Robert's favorite chicken soup, the rich aroma of simmering broth filling the air, thinking that perhaps this small gesture could reconnect us. But Dawn appeared behind me, heels clicking against the tile, her eyes cold and assessing. "You're adding too much salt," she snapped. "I only added a pinch more. Robert always liked it a little rich," I replied, my voice tentative. She laughed, a sound without warmth. "You think you know everything. This isn't your kitchen." Before I could respond, she swung the ladle, and the hot broth splattered against my wrist. "Who cooks like that?" she screamed. And there, in that moment, my son turned up the TV as if to drown my cries, leaving me standing alone amidst the scalding soup, the heat of betrayal, and the sharp realization that the family I had trusted had become a place of cruelty rather than comfort. The burn on my wrist faded more slowly than the sting in my heart. Dawn hadn't apologized, and Robert hadn't even glanced my way. That morning, over breakfast, she smiled at me with a practiced sweetness that made my stomach churn. "Maybe you should take it easy for a while," she said lightly, almost teasingly. "You've been working too hard." I wanted to speak, to demand acknowledgement of the pain she had caused. Instead, I nodded, swallowing the words that refused to form. Robert, distracted by his phone, murmured, "Yeah, maybe. Don't worry, Mom. Don's got it covered." His voice was detached, as if he had learned to tune out the quiet suffering around him. Days turned into a strange rhythm of endurance. I cleaned, cooked, and tried to find solace in small acts of care. Yet every attempt seemed to provoke a new critique. Dawn mocked the way I folded laundry. She rolled her eyes at the meals I prepared, claiming they were outdated or too bland. Even Ethan, my gentle grandson, began mimicking her tone, his words sharp enough to make me flinch. One evening, as I folded dishes in the kitchen, I overheard a conversation that made my blood run cold. "She's too much work," Dawn said, her voice low but deliberate. "Always cooking, always nagging. Maybe she should just go somewhere quiet." Robert's reply was softer, hesitant. "She sold her house for us. Where would she even go?" Dawn's laughter was dry. "Maybe she can finally use that nursing home fund she mentioned years ago." I pressed myself against the wall, listening, every heartbeat thudding in my ears. My husband's voice whispered in my memory, "Always protect yourself, Helen, even if it's from family." Then the inevitable came. 2 days later, I found $200 in an envelope on the kitchen table. My suitcases were stacked neatly by the door. Dawn's words were cold, measured. "We just need space," she said. Her eyes glittered with controlled satisfaction. "You'll understand one day." Robert didn't protest. He stood behind her, silent, arms crossed, watching me pack the remnants of my life. Not a word, not even a glance. I walked out without a backward glance, my hands trembling around the straps of my suitcases. The city's streets became my refuge. Parks, libraries and benches, transformed into temporary homes. Each day was a negotiation with fear and exhaustion. The world outside was indifferent, but I refused to let despair settle completely. Nights were the hardest. Shelters offered warmth, but not dignities. I clutched Peter's watch in my hand, imagining his calm presence beside me. "You'll endure," I whispered to the empty room. "You always do." Then one morning, a letter arrived, addressed formally to Mrs. Helen Mendoza. The envelope was crisp, official. Curiosity overcame exhaustion. Inside, the words blurred as my pulse raced. 13 properties, all under my name, including the very apartment from which I had been cast out. My breath caught in my throat. I read the list again, then again. Millions in assets, quietly waiting for me to claim them. The world I had been forced to leave had never truly been gone. Holding the letter in my hands, I felt an unfamiliar mix of disbelief and exhilaration. 13 properties, millions in value, and among them, the very apartment Robert and Dawn had thrown me out of. It was as if the universe had handed me the power to rewrite a chapter I hadn't realized I still owned. I didn't rush. I walked the streets, the weight of the discovery pressing in on me. My thoughts a whirlpool of anger and cautious hope. Peter's quiet foresight had shielded me from this world, even as I had stumbled through humiliation and neglect. "He always knew what I needed before I did," I murmured. The betrayal I had suffered didn't vanish, but suddenly it was tempered by a newfound strength I hadn't expected to feel. A week later, I returned to the apartment building under the guise of a new tenant, inquiring about the property. The receptionist didn't recognize me. The manager treated me politely, but without respect. I introduced myself formally, voice steady, demeanor calm. "I'm Mrs. Mendoza, the owner," I said. The words tasted like iron on my tongue, sharp and satisfying. Dawn was the first to notice. I saw her from the lobby window, heels paused mid-step, eyes widening as she tried to place me. When our gazes met, her color drained. "Helen," she whispered, disbelief and fear warring on her face. "No," I corrected gently. "Mrs. Mendoza." She stumbled backward, and her usual arrogance faltered. Robert followed a moment later, confusion and guilt etched across his features. What is this?" Dawn's voice quivered, though she tried to maintain authority. I placed the deeds on the counter, watching her hands shake. "This is the apartment," I said quietly. "All 13 properties, including this one, are in my name. Peter left them to me." Her lips parted, but no words came. Robert's hands clenched at his sides. He looked at me with that familiar mix of fear and pleading I hadn't seen since childhood. "Effective immediately," I added. "Rent has been adjusted." The weight of silence filled the room. Dawn's face was pale, her usual confidence shattered. Robert's gaze dropped to the floor, and for a moment, I glimpsed the sun, I had once held in my arms. A man finally facing the consequences of his neglect. I could have lingered in triumph, savoring the reversal, but I didn't. That wasn't the victory I had sought. The realization hit me slowly, like sunlight breaking through clouds. Power and revenge could not erase the years of quiet suffering or the sting of betrayal. True strength came from reclaiming myself, my voice, and my dignity. When they finally left, Dawn's heels clicking angrily against the floor, Robert lingered at the door, tears brimming. "I'm sorry," he whispered. "I didn't know. I wasn't paying attention." I let him speak, but I did not answer. I watched them go, feeling an unexpected calm settle into my chest. The world had shifted beneath my feet, but in this upheaval, I realized something essential: the power to endure, to stand tall, and to demand respect. No one could ever take that from me. As the lobby emptied, I straightened my coat, my hands steady. I was no longer the woman they had dismissed. I was Mrs. Mendoza, and I had finally found the life I deserved. Weeks passed, yet the echo of betrayal lingered in my mind like a stubborn shadow. Robert and Dawn had moved to a smaller apartment. After the rent adjustments made their old life unsustainable, I could have felt satisfaction. Revenge is often painted as sweet, but all I sensed was quiet clarity. The triumph wasn't in their discomfort. It was in reclaiming myself, in standing without fear or apology. I immersed myself in managing the properties, learning the intricate details Peter had quietly safeguarded for me. Each deed, each contract, each tenant interaction became a lesson in autonomy. I realized that wealth without control is meaningless. The true value lay in understanding and asserting my own power. It was ironic, perhaps, that the years I had spent in submission and silence had prepared me for this moment of self-actualization. One rainy afternoon, there was a knock at my door. I opened it to find Robert, soaked from the storm, clutching a small bag of groceries. His eyes were red, his shoulders slumped in exhaustion. He looked older, wearier, and painfully aware of past mistakes. "Mom," he said softly, voice trembling. I lost my job. Dawn left. I don't know where else to go." I studied him, feeling the weight of years and mistakes between us. This was not the son who had once ignored my cries in the kitchen. This was a man stripped of illusions, finally facing the consequences of neglect and arrogance. I gestured for him to sit and poured both of us bowls of chicken soup, the same recipe he had loved as a boy. The aroma filled the apartment. A bridge to memories, both bitter and sweet. He hesitated, spoon trembling. Before taking a tentative taste, his eyes widened, shimmering with unshed tears. "It tastes just like home," he whispered. We ate in silence, the storm outside beating against the window. He spoke finally, voice low and vulnerable. "I was wrong. I ignored everything. I hurt you. I'm so sorry." I didn't answer at once. Instead, I let him sit with the weight of his own remorse. Forgiveness, I realized, was not a gift I owed him. It was something I could offer when the pain had softened. What mattered most now was not revenge, not restitution, but dignity reclaimed. Later, when he fell asleep on the couch, I looked out over the rain-slicked streets, the city lights shimmering in the puddles. I thought of Peter and the quiet foresight that had given me this second chance at life. For years, I had measured my worth by how much I could give, how much I could endure. Now, I understood that true strength lay in self-respect, in recognizing one's own value, even when the world refused to see it. I poured a cup of tea and sat by the window, watching the rain trace paths down the glass. The world outside continued, its indifferent rhythm, but inside, I had found a sanctuary of my own making. I had lost my home, yes, but I had rediscovered my voice, my autonomy, and above all myself. In the end, it was never about revenge. It was about being seen, being heard, and being unshakably, unapologetically whole. Even after the dust settled, I found that the echoes of betrayal lingered, not as pain, but as a quiet reminder of the strength I had discovered within myself. The apartment building, once a symbol of humiliation, now stood as a testament to endurance. Each letter in my nameplate, Mrs. Mendoza, felt like a declaration, a reminder that I could shape my life according to my own terms. Robert occasionally visited, a shadow of the son I once knew, humbled by experience and remorse. Our conversations were cautious, filled with pauses that spoke louder than words. There was no rush to forgive, no expectation that the past could be erased. Yet beneath the tension, there was a fragile bridge being rebuilt, a tentative acknowledgement that accountability could coexist with compassion. I spent mornings reviewing tenant records and afternoons walking the city streets, observing life from a perspective I had rarely granted myself. The rhythm of ordinary people, their struggles and triumphs, reminded me that resilience is not an extraordinary gift. It is an everyday choice. I had endured cruelty, neglect, and dismissal, yet here I was, claiming not only what was rightfully mine, but also a sense of self I had long forgotten. The discovery of Peter's foresight, the properties, the hidden wealth, had initially seemed like a deus ex machina, an external solution to external problems. But I soon realized the true gift was internal, the clarity to see my own worth, the courage to demand respect, and the patience to act with purpose rather than impulsive anger. Revenge, as satisfying as it might have appeared in imagination, would never have healed the bruises to my dignity. What mattered was reclamation, self-possession, and the quiet knowledge that no one could diminish me again. One evening, as rain traced silver rivulets down the window, I found myself humming a tune Peter used to whistle while tending the garden. The melody wrapped around me like a comforting hand, a gentle affirmation that life could still hold beauty even after loss. I poured a cup of tea and sat with the city lights reflecting in the wet streets, contemplating how far I had traveled, not in distance, but in understanding. I thought of Dawn and Robert, not with bitterness, but as part of a chapter I had lived fully. They had shown me the fragility of trust and the consequences of indifference. They had forced me into a crucible, and from it, I had emerged not hardened, but tempered, stronger, and more self-aware. As the night deepened, I realized that life's true victories are rarely measured in wealth or status. They are measured in moments of self-recognition, in the courage to assert dignity when it is denied, and in the choice to rise rather than remain small. I had once lost my home, my sense of belonging, even my name in the eyes of my family. Now I had found my voice, my independence, and above all myself, and that, I understood fully, was a triumph no one could ever take away.